"Where is she? I can't see her." The desperate shouts echo across Sunset Beach as red water churns violently beneath the surface. "Look harder! She's under there!" A massive shadow circles below, refusing to let go. "Get the Coast Guard down here now." This wasn't just a random attack. It was the result of warnings ignored, patterns dismissed, and a system that put profits over safety. If this story disturbs you, it should. Because it's not the first time a lifeguard is paid the ultimate price. And if nothing changes, it won't be the last. Wait, let's go back to the beginning. It was supposed to be just another perfect summer day at Pacific Coast Beach Resort. Crystal clear waters, gentle waves, and families enjoying their vacation. But what happened next would leave hundreds of witnesses frozen in terror. It would mark the last day of lifeguard Elen Shaw's life. In front of dozens of beachgoers, in broad daylight, something emerged from the depths. This isn't just a tragic story. It's a wake-up call about the dangers lurking beneath our favorite swimming spots. Chapter 1. The Lifeguard Story. Elen Shaw was just 26 years old when she took her position as head lifeguard at Pacific Coast Beach Resort in the summer of 2023. Young, athletic, and passionate about ocean safety, she wasn't just another seasonal employee. She was the kind of person who made everyone around her feel safer just by being there. To her fellow lifeguards, Ellen was more than just a supervisor. She was the heart of the beach patrol team, the person who arrived first every morning to check conditions, the one who stayed late to ensure equipment was ready, the one who knew every regular swimmer by name and watched out for their safety like they were family. Her younger brother Jake remembers her dedication. Ellen lived for that beach. She'd come home talking about the waves, the currents, who she helped that day. She took every rescue personally, every close call to heart. She believed it was her responsibility to keep everyone safe. Ellen had grown up on these waters. She'd been swimming since she could walk, surfing since she was 12. She had earned her lifeguard certification at 18. She knew every current, every sandbar, every hidden danger along that stretch of coastline. Her rescue record was flawless, with over 40 successful saves during her 3 years on the job. But there was one thing about the waters around Pacific Coast Beach that troubled her more than any rip current or storm surge: the sharks. Over the past 2 summers, Ellen had logged an increasing number of shark sightings in her daily reports. Most were harmless species, nurse sharks, and reef sharks that posed no threat to swimmers. But there had been others. Larger shapes moving in the deeper waters just beyond the swimming area. Shadows that made her reach for her binoculars and hold her breath. Her log entries from July 2023 paint a picture of growing concern. Large predator sighted 200 yards offshore. Cleared water as precaution. Unusual feeding activity observed near North Jetty. Increased patrols recommended. Multiple large fish kills washing ashore. Possible predator activity. Resort management dismissed her concerns. Tourism was booming, and the beach was generating record revenue. There had been no actual incidents, no injuries, no concrete evidence of danger. Her supervisor, Mark Peterson, often brushed off her reports during weekly meetings. Ellen was always vigilant, sometimes too much so. Peterson would later tell investigators, "She saw threats everywhere. We couldn't shut down the beach every time she thought she saw something in the water." But Ellen's concerns weren't unfounded. Marine biologist Dr. Amanda Torres, who had been studying shark migration patterns along the coast, had documented a significant increase in great white activity in the area. Her research, published just weeks before the attack, warned of changing feeding patterns and increased aggression among the local shark population. The water temperatures had been unusually warm that summer, Dr. Torres explained. This pushed traditional prey species into shallower waters, and the predators followed. We were seeing great whites in areas where they hadn't been spotted in decades. Ellen had read Dr. Torres's research. She had printed copies and tried to distribute them to her team and resort management. Most dismissed it as academic speculation, but Ellen knew better. She could feel something changing in the water, something that made her instincts scream danger even on the calmest days. As August approached, her anxiety grew. She began extending her patrol routes, spending more time scanning the horizon, keeping swimmers closer to shore. Her fellow lifeguards noticed the change. Some called her paranoid. Others respected her instincts. She'd been different those last few weeks, recalled fellow lifeguard Maria Santos. More tense, more focused. She kept saying something wasn't right, that we needed to be extra careful. I wish we'd listened more closely. Chapter 2. The Beach's Dark History. Pacific Coast Beach Resort marketed itself as a pristine paradise, a safe haven for families seeking the perfect ocean getaway. But beneath the glossy brochures and 5-star reviews lay a history that management preferred to keep buried. The stretch of coastline where the resort was built had long been known to local fishermen as Blood Point. The name wasn't meant to sound ominous to tourists. It came from the iron-rich red sand that colored the water during certain tidal conditions. But old-timers knew there was more to the story. Captain Roberto Mendez had been fishing these waters for over 40 years. His grandfather had worked these same fishing grounds, and his great-grandfather before him. The family had stories, passed down through generations, about the waters around what was now Pacific Coast Beach. My grandfather used to say this was always shark territory, Captain Mendez explained. The deep channel that runs close to shore, the way the currents bring in the fish, it's like a highway for predators. We always knew to be careful here. Historical records from the local Maritime Museum reveal a pattern of incidents dating back over a century. In 1923, a fishing vessel reported a massive great white attacking their nets just offshore from the current resort location. In 1954, a local swimmer went missing during an early morning swim, with witnesses reporting a large disturbance in the water. In 1987, a surfer was attacked but survived, requiring over 200 stitches. But when Pacific Coast Beach Resort was being developed in the early 2000s, these incidents were quietly omitted from environmental impact studies. The resort's public relations team focused on the area's natural beauty, its excellent surfing conditions, and its family-friendly atmosphere. The darker history was swept under the rug. Resort developer Charles Hamilton later defended this decision. We looked at the statistical data. Shark attacks are incredibly rare. More people are struck by lightning than attacked by sharks. We weren't going to let outdated local folklore interfere with creating a world-class resort. But the folklore wasn't just superstition. Marine records showed that the waters around the resort sat at the intersection of 3 major current systems, creating an upwelling that brought nutrient-rich water to the surface. This attracted massive schools of fish, which in turn attracted larger predators. The resort's location was also problematic for another reason. The beach sat at the mouth of Salmon Creek, which during spawning season filled the water with wounded and dying fish. This created what marine biologists call a predator magnet, an area where sharks would congregate to feed on easy prey. Local surf shops had their own informal warning system. Experienced surfers knew to avoid the area during certain conditions, particularly in late summer when the salmon runs were at their peak. But resort guests were never informed of these local knowledge patterns. We tried to warn people, said longtime local surfer Tommy Mitchell. But the resort staff would get angry if they caught us talking to their guests about sharks. They said we were hurting their business. I guess profits were more important than safety. The pattern was clear to anyone willing to look. Every few years, there would be a close call, a sighting, or an incident that served as a reminder of what lurked beneath the surface. But each time, the resort would minimize the danger, increase their marketing efforts, and continue business as usual. By 2023, Pacific Coast Beach Resort was hosting over 50,000 visitors annually. The beach was packed from dawn to dusk with swimmers, surfers, and families enjoying the water. The sheer number of people in the ocean had created a statistical inevitability that resort management seemed unwilling to acknowledge. The attack on Elen Shaw wasn't an anomaly. It was a tragedy waiting to happen, predicted by history, ignored by those in power, and paid for with the life of someone who had dedicated herself to keeping others safe. Chapter 3. Warning Signs Ignored. The signs were there for anyone willing to look. Throughout the summer of 2023, the waters around Pacific Coast Beach Resort had been sending increasingly urgent warnings that something was wrong. It started with the fish kills. In early July, resort maintenance crews began finding dozens of dead fish washing up on the beach each morning. Large predatory fish like mackerel and tuna, their bodies bearing massive bite marks and torn flesh. The resort's explanation was simple. Natural predation cycles, nothing to worry about. But marine biologist Dr. Patricia Williams, who examined some of the carcasses, saw something more troubling. The bite patterns were consistent with great white shark attacks. The size and spacing of the tooth marks indicated an exceptionally large predator, possibly over 20 feet in length. Her report was submitted to both the resort management and local authorities. It was filed away and forgotten. Then came the behavioral changes among the local marine life. Dolphins, normally playful and curious around swimmers, began avoiding the beach area entirely. Seals, usually abundant on the offshore rocks, disappeared almost overnight. Even the seabirds changed their patterns, no longer diving in the waters near the resort. Elen Shaw documented these changes in her daily reports. Unusual absence of marine life. Water appears normal, but ecosystem behavior suggests possible predator presence. Recommend increased vigilance. Her supervisor, Mark Peterson, was growing tired of her constant warnings. Ellen was seeing problems everywhere. Fish die, animals move around. It's all normal. We couldn't shut down operations every time nature did something unexpected. But the warnings weren't just coming from Ellen. Other lifeguards began reporting strange sightings. Dark shapes in the water that were too large to be dolphins, too aggressive to be whales. Unusual disturbances on the surface that couldn't be explained by currents or wind. Lifeguard Carlos Rivera had been working the North Tower when he spotted something that made his blood run cold. It was about 200 yards out, just at the edge of the swimming area. This massive shadow, maybe 20 feet long, just cruising parallel to the beach. I'd never seen anything like it. Rivera reported the sighting immediately. Resort management's response was swift and predictable. They reminded all lifeguards that unconfirmed wildlife sightings were not to be shared with guests, and that causing unnecessary panic could result in disciplinary action. The most telling warning came from an unexpected source. On August 10th, just 5 days before the attack, a group of marine biology students from the nearby university were conducting a research dive just offshore from the resort. What they found in the water made them cut their dive short and immediately contact their professor. The water was wrong, recalled graduate student Emily Chen. We'd been diving this area for months, and suddenly everything was different. No fish, no normal activity, just this feeling of something massive nearby. We surfaced after just 20 minutes. Their professor, Dr. Michael Torres, immediately recognized the signs. It's called a predator void. When a large apex predator moves into an area, all other marine life clears out. It's nature's way of avoiding danger. Dr. Torres contacted the resort directly, speaking with the general manager about the potential danger. He was assured that the resort took all safety concerns seriously and that appropriate precautions would be taken. No changes were made to beach operations. The final warning came from Captain Roberto Mendez, the veteran fisherman who had worked these waters for decades. On August 14th, the morning of the attack, he radioed the Coast Guard with an urgent message. I've got a massive great white shadowing my boat about half a mile offshore from Pacific Coast Beach. This thing is enormous, maybe 25 feet. It's heading toward the beach, and there are people in the water. The Coast Guard logged the report and attempted to contact the resort. The call went to voicemail. By the time anyone responded, it was too late. Later investigation would reveal that resort management had received over a dozen warnings about increased shark activity in the weeks leading up to the attack. Marine biologists, local fishermen, their own lifeguards, and even paying guests had reported unusual sightings and concerning behavior. Each warning was dismissed, minimized, or ignored. The resort's position was clear. They were in the business of providing a safe, enjoyable experience for their guests. Acknowledging the possibility of danger would hurt their reputation and their bottom line. But ignoring danger doesn't make it go away. It only ensures that when tragedy strikes, it will be even more devastating. Chapter 4. The Fatal Day. August 15th, 2023, dawned clear and perfect at Pacific Coast Beach Resort. The morning sun painted the ocean in shades of gold and turquoise. Gentle waves lapped at the shore, and the beach filled early with families eager to enjoy another day in paradise. Elen Shaw arrived at her lifeguard station at 6 a.m., 2 hours before her official shift began. This had become her routine during the busy summer season, giving her time to check conditions, review weather reports, and prepare for the day ahead. Her morning inspection revealed ideal conditions. Light offshore winds, calm seas, and excellent visibility. The tide was incoming, bringing clean water and perfect swimming conditions. To most observers, it was a picture-perfect beach day. But Ellen felt uneasy. She couldn't explain it, but something about the water looked wrong. The color was slightly off, a deeper blue that suggested unusual depth or current patterns. The absence of dolphins and seals, normally visible on such clear mornings, was notable. She radioed her concerns to the resort's main office. Unusual water conditions this morning. No marine life visible. Recommend increased caution protocols. The response was immediate and dismissive. Ellen, it's a beautiful day. The guests are excited to get in the water. Let's focus on providing a great experience. By 9 a.m., the beach was bustling with activity. Families spread blankets on the sand. Swimmers waded into the gentle surf, and the resort's water sports equipment was being deployed. The ocean was alive with human activity. Dozens of people enjoying the perfect conditions. Ellen positioned herself at the main Lifeguard tower, the elevated platform that provided the best view of the entire swimming area. Her fellow lifeguards, Maria Santos and Carlos Rivera, took their positions at the north and south towers respectively. The first few hours passed uneventfully. Ellen made several preventive rescues, helping struggling swimmers and redirecting people away from the rockier areas. Her vigilance was constant, her binoculars rarely leaving her hands. At 11:30, she spotted something that made her heart skip. A large, dark shape moving parallel to the beach, just beyond the designated swimming area. She focused her binoculars, trying to get a clear view. Maria Carlos, do you see anything unusual about 200 yards straight out from the main beach? She radioed to her team. Both lifeguards scanned the area with their own binoculars. I see something, Carlos responded. Could be a large fish or maybe debris. Hard to tell from this distance. Ellen watched the shape for several minutes. It was too large to be a dolphin, too purposeful in its movement to be drifting debris. Her instincts screamed danger, but she had no concrete evidence to act on. At 12:15, she made the decision that would save countless lives even as it cost her own. She activated the beach's public address system. Attention swimmers and water sports participants. As a precautionary measure, please move closer to shore. Stay within the designated swimming area marked by the red buoys. The announcement caused some grumbling among beachgoers, but most complied. The swimming area was cleared of its outermost users, with everyone moving to within 50 yards of the shore. Ellen's supervisor, Mark Peterson, was not pleased. He radioed her immediately. Ellen, what's the reason for the swimming restriction? You're going to get complaints. Possible large marine animal in the area, she responded. Just being cautious. Is there an actual sighting or just another one of your feelings? Before Ellen could respond, her attention was caught by a commotion in the water. A family with 2 teenagers had ventured beyond the restricted area, their bright yellow inflatable raft drifting toward the deeper water. She grabbed her rescue board and sprinted toward the water. As she paddled out to intercept the family, she noticed the water around their raft beginning to churn. Something large was moving beneath them. Get back to shore now, she shouted to the family. Move toward the beach immediately. The family, sensing urgency in her voice, began paddling frantically toward shore. But their inflatable raft was clumsy and slow, and they were still over 100 yards from safety. That's when the water exploded. Chapter 5. Chaos and Rescue Attempts. The attack began with a violent eruption of water that could be seen from every corner of the beach. The massive great white shark, estimated at over 22 feet in length, had been stalking the family's raft for several minutes before making its move. But it wasn't the family that became the target. As Elen Shaw paddled desperately toward the endangered tourists, her rescue board moving through the water with trained efficiency, the predator made a decision that would change everything. The shark turned away from the slow-moving raft and focused on the rapidly approaching Lifeguard. Ellen's powerful strokes and the splash of her board had attracted the attention of an apex predator, already in hunting mode. From the beach, witnesses watched in horror as the massive shark emerged from the depths directly beneath Ellen's rescue board. The impact was tremendous, launching both the Lifeguard and her board several feet into the air. I saw her go up, remembered witness Jennifer Martinez, who was vacationing with her family. She was thrown out of the water like a rag doll. Then everything went red. The shark's initial strike had been devastating. Its massive jaws clamped down on Ellen's torso, the force of the bite audible even from the beach. But rather than diving deep as great whites typically do, the predator stayed near the surface, thrashing violently in a display of raw power. On the beach, chaos erupted. Screams filled the air as hundreds of beachgoers witnessed the attack. Parents grabbed their families and fled toward the resort buildings. Others stood frozen in shock, unable to process what they were seeing. Lifeguard Carlos Rivera was the first to respond. He grabbed his rescue jet ski and roared toward the attack site, his emergency whistle piercing the air. But as he approached, the shark's behavior became even more erratic. It was like nothing I'd ever seen, Rivera later testified. The shark was almost vertical in the water, holding Ellen up like some kind of trophy. There was blood everywhere, and she wasn't moving. Rivera attempted to approach from the side, hoping to distract the predator or force it to release its grip. But the shark was aware of his presence and began moving toward deeper water, still carrying Ellen in its jaws. From the North Tower, Maria Santos was coordinating with emergency services. She had called 911 within seconds of the attack, but the nearest Coast Guard station was over 20 minutes away. Every second counted, and help was too far away. "We need immediate medical assistance at Pacific Coast Beach Resort," she radioed. "We have a shark attack in progress. The victim is still in the water." Resort management was in full crisis mode. General Manager David Chen ordered the immediate evacuation of all swimming areas and the deployment of every available rescue craft. But their response was too little, too late. The family that Ellen had been attempting to rescue was now paddling frantically toward shore, their yellow raft making painfully slow progress. Other beachgoers in the water were swimming desperately for the beach, many of them panicking and creating additional rescue situations. Captain Roberto Mendez, who had been monitoring marine radio frequencies from his fishing boat, heard the emergency calls and immediately changed course toward the resort. His 40-foot vessel was the largest rescue craft in the immediate area. "I was about 3 miles out when I heard the mayday," Captain Mendez explained. "I pushed my engines to maximum and started praying I wouldn't be too late." Back at the attack site, the shark's behavior remained unpredictable. For several minutes, it held Ellen motionless in its jaws, blood spreading in a crimson pool around them. Carlos Rivera continued to circle on his jet ski, looking for any opportunity to intervene. Then, without warning, the shark released its grip. Ellen's body floated to the surface, her bright red lifeguard uniform now torn and stained with blood. Rivera immediately moved in, pulling her onto his jet ski while scanning the water for any sign of the predator. She was unconscious, but still breathing, Rivera recalled. "I could see massive trauma to her torso and legs, but she was alive. I started CPR immediately while heading for shore." The rescue attempt was complicated by the shark's continued presence. The massive predator hadn't fled the area but was circling nearby, its behavior increasingly aggressive. Other swimmers and rescue personnel were still in danger. Captain Mendez arrived just as Rivera was pulling Elen from the water. His larger vessel provided a stable platform for medical treatment, and he immediately began coordinating with the approaching Coast Guard helicopters. "When I saw that girl, I knew we were fighting for her life," Captain Mendez said. "But I also knew that shark was still out there, and it wasn't finished." Chapter 6. The Aftermath and Cover-Up. The Coast Guard helicopter arrived at Pacific Coast Beach Resort at 12:47 p.m., just 18 minutes after the attack began. Paramedics immediately took over Elen Shaw's medical care, but the damage was catastrophic. Multiple trauma wounds, massive blood loss, and signs of shock indicated that time was running out. "She coded twice during the flight to the hospital," recalled paramedic Lieutenant Sarah Williams. "We managed to get her back both times, but her injuries were beyond anything we'd seen before. The shark had crushed several ribs, punctured her lung, and caused severe internal bleeding." Ellen was rushed into emergency surgery at Pacific Memorial Hospital, where a team of trauma surgeons worked for over 6 hours to save her life. Despite their efforts, she was pronounced dead at 7:23 p.m. on August 15, 2023. The news of her death sent shockwaves through the local community and beyond. Within hours, the story had gone national. News crews descended on the resort, kept seeking answers about how such a tragedy could have occurred at a popular family destination. But Pacific Coast Beach Resort was already in damage control mode. Within an hour of the attack, the resort's legal team had arrived on site. All staff were instructed not to speak to media outlets, and security personnel began confiscating cell phone videos from witnesses. The resort's first official statement came that evening. "We are deeply saddened by the tragic incident that occurred today. Our hearts go out to the family of our employee. We are cooperating fully with all investigations and will not be commenting further out of respect for the family." Behind the scenes, a very different story was emerging. Resort management had begun systematically destroying evidence that might implicate them in the tragedy. Elen's daily reports, which had documented increasing shark activity, were deleted from the computer system. Her supervisor's emails, which had dismissed her concerns, were wiped from the servers. The cover-up extended beyond just electronic records. Physical evidence was also disappearing. The marine biology reports that had warned of increased predator activity were removed from the resort's files. The Coast Guard communications log, which had recorded Captain Mendez's warning about the massive shark, was somehow corrupted and became unreadable. But the resort couldn't control everything. Within days, cell phone videos of the attack began surfacing online. The footage was grainy and shot from a distance, but it clearly showed the massive size of the shark and the violence of the attack. Social media exploded with outrage. Hashtags like Justice for Elen and Shark Attack Cover-Up began trending worldwide. Former employees of the resort started coming forward with their own stories of safety concerns being ignored and profits being prioritized over protection. Maria Santos, Elen's fellow lifeguard, was one of the first to speak out. "They're trying to make this look like a freak accident, but it wasn't." Elen had been warning about sharks for weeks. She filed report after report, and they ignored every one. The resort's response was swift and harsh. Santos was fired for violating her confidentiality agreement. Other employees who had spoken to media outlets were similarly terminated. The message was clear. Silence would be rewarded. Truth-telling would be punished. But the story was too big to contain. Investigative journalists began digging deeper into the resort's history, uncovering the pattern of incidents and cover-ups that stretched back years. The beach's history as Blood Point was revealed, along with the warnings that had been ignored during the resort's development. Dr. Patricia Williams, the marine biologist who had examined the fish kills, went public with her findings. "I submitted a report clearly warning of great white shark activity in the area. That report was ignored. If they had taken proper precautions, Elen Shaw would still be alive." The legal battle began almost immediately. Elen's family, led by her brother Jake, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the resort. The case alleged negligence, failure to warn, and deliberate indifference to known dangers. "My sister died because they cared more about their profits than her safety," Jake Shaw told reporters. "She tried to warn them. She tried to protect people, and they silenced her. Now she's gone, and they're trying to pretend it was just bad luck." But the resort had resources and connections that the Shaw family couldn't match. High-powered attorneys were hired, expert witnesses were retained, and a public relations campaign was launched to shift blame away from the resort. The narrative they promoted was simple. Shark attacks are unpredictable natural disasters, impossible to prevent or predict. Elen Shaw was a hero who died doing her job, but her death was no one's fault. This narrative might have worked, if not for one crucial piece of evidence that the resort's legal team had overlooked. In their haste to destroy incriminating documents, they had forgotten about the backup files stored on an off-site server. Those files contained everything: Elen's reports, the warnings from marine biologists, the communications with local authorities, and most damaging of all, internal emails showing that resort management had been aware of the danger and had chosen to ignore it. The truth was about to come out, whether the resort wanted it to or not. Chapter 7. The Pattern of Silence. Elen Shaw's death was not an isolated incident. As investigators dug deeper into the resort industry's handling of marine safety, a disturbing pattern emerged. Across the country, similar tragedies had occurred, and in each case, the response had been the same: silence, cover-up, and business as usual. The pattern was always identical. Warning signs would emerge, Experts would raise concerns, and resort management would prioritize profits over safety. When tragedy inevitably struck, the victims would be portrayed as heroes who died in unforeseeable accidents, while the evidence of negligence would be quietly buried. In 2019, surfer Tommy Rodriguez was killed by a great white shark at Coral Bay Resort in California. Investigation revealed that marine biologists had warned of increased shark activity in the area for months before the attack. The resort had ignored these warnings, fearing that acknowledging the danger would hurt their business. In 2020, swimmer Lisa Chen disappeared during a dawn swim at Ocean View Resort in North Carolina. Her body was never found, but witnesses reported seeing a large shark in the area. The resort claimed she had been caught in a rip current, despite clear evidence of predator activity. In 2021, lifeguard Marcus Johnson was attacked while attempting a rescue at Seaside Resort in South Carolina. He survived, but was left permanently disabled. The resort's insurance company settled the case quietly, with a non-disclosure agreement that prevented Johnson from speaking about the incident. Each case followed the same script. The resorts would express sympathy for the victims while denying any responsibility. They would hire expensive legal teams and public relations firms to control the narrative. They would destroy evidence, silence witnesses, and use their financial resources to avoid accountability. But Elen Shaw's case was different. Her brother Jake refused to be silenced. He had inherited his sister's determination and her sense of justice. He assembled a team of attorneys, marine biologists, and investigative journalists determined to expose the truth. The breakthrough came when former resort employee David Park came forward with copies of internal documents he had saved before being fired. The documents revealed the full extent of the cover-up, including emails between resort executives discussing how to manage the shark problem without affecting their business. One email, sent just days before the attack, was particularly damning. Resort General Manager David Chen had written, "We need to be very careful about how we handle these shark reports. Any official acknowledgement of danger could expose us to liability and hurt our reputation. Let's keep this information internal and avoid creating panic." The documents also revealed that the resort had been aware of the area's history as Blood Point during the development process. They had chosen to build there anyway, believing that the economic benefits outweighed the risks. Marine biologist Dr. Michael Torres, who had tried to warn the resort about the predator activity, was vindicated by the evidence. They knew the danger was real, and they chose to ignore it. Elen Shaw died because they valued their profits more than human life. The legal case became a media sensation. Reporters from around the world descended on the small coastal town to cover the trial. The resort's attempts to control the narrative failed as witness after witness testified about the warnings that had been ignored. Captain Roberto Mendez, the veteran fisherman who had tried to warn authorities on the morning of the attack, provided devastating testimony. "I radioed that morning about a massive great white heading toward the beach. I told them people were in danger. Nobody listened. If they had evacuated the water for just 30 minutes, that girl would be alive today." His radio logs were entered into evidence, showing the exact time of his warning and the resort's failure to respond. The prosecution played the actual audio recording in court, Mendez's urgent voice crackling through the speakers. "Coast Guard, this is fishing vessel Maria Elena. I have a 25-foot great white shark approximately half a mile from Pacific Coast Beach Resort heading inshore. There are swimmers in the water. Please advise." The courtroom fell silent as the timestamp showed the warning had come 43 minutes before the attack. 43 minutes that could have saved Ellen's life. Dr. Patricia Williams returned to testify about her fish kill analysis and the report that had been buried by resort management. She brought photographs of the carcasses she had examined, their massive bite wounds clearly visible. These weren't random predation events. This was a pattern of feeding behavior, indicating a large, aggressive predator had taken up residence in the area. The prosecution then called former resort employee David Park, who had been fired for questioning safety protocols. Park revealed that he had been instructed to dispose of dead fish found on the beach before guests arrived each morning, ensuring that visitors never saw the evidence of predator activity. "They called it beach beautification," Park testified. "But we all knew what those bite marks meant. We were removing evidence of shark attacks on fish so tourists wouldn't get scared. Management told us that talking about it would cost us our jobs. The defense team, led by prominent attorney Richard Sterling, attempted to portray the attack as an unforeseeable tragedy. They brought in their own marine biologists, who testified that shark behavior was inherently unpredictable and that no amount of precaution could have prevented the attack. But their credibility crumbled when the prosecution revealed that Sterling's expert witnesses had been paid over $200,000 for their testimony. Cross-examination revealed that several of them had financial ties to the resort industry and had testified in similar cases across the country. The turning point came when Carlos Rivera, the lifeguard who had attempted to rescue Ellen, took the stand. Despite losing his job and facing legal threats from the resort, he testified about the pattern of ignored warnings and suppressed safety concerns. Ellen knew something was wrong, Rivera testified. She tried to warn everyone, but they wouldn't listen. They told her to stop creating problems, to focus on keeping the guests happy. She died trying to save people while they were worried about their profits. Rivera's testimony was supported by Maria Santos, who had also been fired after speaking to the media. She revealed that resort management had offered her a substantial settlement in exchange for her silence, which she had refused. "They offered me $50,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement," Santos testified. "They wanted me to say that Ellen had acted recklessly, that she had ignored proper safety protocols. I told them I wouldn't lie about my friend's death for any amount of money." The prosecution's most powerful moment came when they called Ellen's mother, Margaret Shaw, to testify about her daughter's character and dedication. Through tears, she read from Elen's personal journal, entries that revealed her growing anxiety about the shark activity and her frustration with management's dismissive attitude. July 28th, Margaret read aloud. "Saw another large shadow today, definitely predatory behavior. Tried to talk to Mark about increasing safety protocols, but he said, 'I was being paranoid. I know what I saw. I know these waters. Something is wrong and I'm scared that someone is going to get hurt.'" The entry was dated just 18 days before her death. The courtroom was completely silent as Margaret continued reading her daughter's final entries, each one documenting her growing concern and her supervisor's continued dismissal of her warnings. The defense's closing argument focused on the inherent risks of ocean activities and the impossibility of predicting animal behavior. They argued that the resort had followed all applicable safety regulations and that Ellen's death was a tragic accident that no reasonable precautions could have prevented. But the prosecution's closing was devastating. Lead attorney Jennifer Walsh stood before the jury and methodically outlined every warning that had been ignored, every expert who had been dismissed, every piece of evidence that had been buried. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Walsh concluded, "this was not an act of nature. This was not an unforeseeable tragedy. This was corporate negligence of the highest order. They knew the danger was real. They knew people could die, and they chose profit over protection. Elen Shaw died because they valued their reputation more than her life." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a verdict of $15 million in damages against the resort. But more importantly, the case had exposed the pattern of negligence that had cost lives across the industry. The aftermath of the trial brought changes, though not as many as advocates had hoped. New regulations were passed requiring resorts to disclose known marine hazards to their guests. Warning systems were improved, and emergency response protocols were strengthened. But the fundamental problem remained. The resort industry continued to prioritize profits over safety, and regulatory agencies lacked the resources to enforce meaningful oversight. Elen Shaw's death had not been in vain, but it had not been enough to prevent future tragedies. The pattern of silence continued, broken only by the occasional case that captured public attention before fading from memory. Jake Shaw established the Elen Shaw Foundation, dedicated to marine safety education and supporting families affected by preventable water-related tragedies. The Foundation's mission statement reflects his sister's values. No one should die because those in power chose silence over safety. The Foundation works to break the pattern that has cost so many lives. They advocate for stronger regulations, support whistleblowers who expose dangerous conditions, and provide resources for communities to understand and address marine hazards. But their work is far from over. Every summer, new resorts open on dangerous coastlines. Every year, new warnings are ignored by those who profit from the ocean's beauty while denying its dangers. The story of Elen Shaw is not just about one tragic day on a beautiful beach. It's about a system that values profits over people, silence over safety, and public relations over public welfare. Until that system changes, until the pattern of silence is broken permanently, more heroes like Elen Shaw will pay the ultimate price for others' greed and negligence. Her story should serve as a warning to all of us. When we choose to ignore danger, when we prioritize profit over protection, when we silence those who speak truth to power, we create the conditions for tragedy. Elen Shaw died doing what she loved, protecting others from harm. The question is whether we will honor her memory by demanding the changes that could prevent future tragedies, or whether we will allow the pattern of silence to continue until the next family has to bury their hero. The choice, like the ocean itself, remains vast and unforgiving. But unlike the ocean, it's a choice we can control. You've been watching Animal Ambush and Encounters, where we uncover the stories they try to forget. If you believe in holding those in power accountable and ensuring that no more lives are lost to preventable tragedies, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it to keep the conversation going. Because silence isn't just complicity, it's deadly.